All right, let's get rolling. Today, texture. Uh, Texture is the big word. I tried to find some stuff on it, not like the lecture, but some things that students do in the past, and I couldn't even figure out how to do it myself. But I will tell you what not to do if you ever find this stuff. So, uh, yeah, and we know what we're doing. I'm going to tell you about texture and explain how great it is as a design element. You're going to find three examples: poster, movie poster, album cover, and book cover. And then you're going to play around with texture. This one is going to be harder for you guys. This one is only three. It is much tougher to emulate textures in Illustrator. And so it's going to push your creativity, push your mind a little bit, like what can be defined as a texture. And I'm talking like a texture in general, like fuzzy, like something like that. How do you illustrate that? It's doable. You know why it's doable? We see it in cartoons all the time. I mean, if you watch a single cartoon in your life or looked at a single cartoon, it's just line work simulating a texture. So it can be done. It can be done. So no worries there. With that said, let's jump in to the lecture. All right. I missed the color one. All right. So texture. Texture is what we're going to do is we're adding a feeling to the design now, or something when you feel like when you're starting out, and especially with the computer, less with, if you do handwork, texture is lost. You get on the computer, you type out some words, and the type comes out perfectly. And you add in, like what we've been doing, very simple stuff, but it's all flat, very flat. There's a whole design movement based around flat. This is about the texture and starting to get what we call a tactile feel across in a piece. And it may be done for many, many reasons. One, visual interest. I just want to make it visually interesting. And so I'm going to add a texture and play with some adjustments here and there just to kind of add visual interest that's not overwhelming, but works within the design that I picked. We can do, I want a realistic texture within my design to help really illustrate what's going on. I want an old school texture that used to have to happen, but doesn't need to now, but I want to show that because I want to make it look quote unquote retro. And the characteristics for texture is smooth, rough, soft, hard, bumpy, slick. It's any of these things, and it's it is a little bit hard to get across, but it's doable. It's done all the time. An actual texture refers to the tangible physical surface characteristics of an object that can be felt through touch. We're implying it through visual texture, and we want to fool people. Like if you're in my Photoshop class, I look like Photoshop is about fooling people. I want to fool people into thinking that my Photoshop piece is real. That's what we do. We fake them out. And that may, brings in some textures, patterns, and all that kind of stuff. Why do we use it? It can add interest, enhance areas, and just bring in a whole new way of thinking within the design. There's plenty of design that I love that it's just like I said, kind of like flat, perfect, like Swiss design, no textures at all, really great. But it's not as interesting maybe as a design that we'll look over here that has like some texture and depth to it. And that's the big one. It's creating depth. It just adds a whole nother layer to the design. It also works with emotions, evoking emotions. We get that feeling, you know. If I can make that piece look and feel like it's fuzzy, like a little kitten. Oh, it's gonna be so gentle and nice. Or there's one with asphalt, but it doesn't combine with this biking one. But like, you show hard, tough rocks and ground. And what does that make you think? It all goes into that. And you can think about like your favorite items advertised and how they're advertised. Like we got a truck, a 4x4 truck is going to be, burning through the desert and the sand and hard, gritty and hot, blah, blah. And a sports car is going to be on that smooth, glassy, watered down pavement. Two different textures to evoke two different emotions to people who, like we just want to reinforce. The truck is tough. The sports car is slick. And we do it through texture. And, I say when we talk about ads, I'm not just meaning TV ads. Look at picture ads, like in a magazine. And so that's why, it's so important. Like glossy, we talk about glossy look and feel. If something's high end, we want it glossy. And if something's rough and, dirty, then we add dirt. We're adding texture to our design in order to help evoke emotion and get people like, yeah, that's how I feel when I use that product. So it adds contrast and variety, which is really a great thing to add into the designs as well. It breaks up the space, gets you something else to look at. In the application, if we go, it's used in everything, print, digital, create interest. There's even, I don't know if I would say tactile, but there's a word called skeuomorphism, and it's what computer people used to do when creating interfaces. They would make the computer interface look like the object it was trying to represent. So back when MP3s were coming out, you would have a digital MP3 player on your computer. And the people who would design like what it would look like would try to make it look like a car stereo. So you had like a volume knob, a front and a back, and another volume knob. And they put all the shadowing in, and they would try to make it look texturally like something you were familiar with. So you weren't confused as to how do you use this new digital audio file. And we know nowadays, that's all out the window. Like everything, nothing looks like it does because we've gotten used to the digital world. But that used to be the huge thing with this tactile and visual interaction, is making things look like they are in real life, as to not to scare the consumer and have them be very familiar with what they're doing. A lot of psychology and design, I'm telling you. And balance and harmony, that helps things out, creates good interest. So let's zoom in and check out our pieces. When we talk about texture, it's not always this one on the right. That's why I don't start with that one. I'll block it off. Start with the one right here. It's a texture. It's a geometric texture added through, like Photoshop and whatever. And it's really cool. It's really great. One, the texture is reminiscent of this shape. If you zoom in, it's like these little diamonds were created. And what they did is they took those diamonds, they took the image, and they offset the image using this pattern or texture. But like what they did is they turned a pattern into a texture by offsetting it and making that interest change. it's not the same piece. Oh, let's zoom in for my online. I never really know how clear it is up on the big screen, but yeah. So there's the texture. So then you can start to argue. Well, is it a pattern or is it a texture or is it both? So that's where you get to start like really changing things. And then how does it interact? I just said how it works together. This shape is based off of this shape. It's right in there, right there. Like you can find that shape in this design, which is used to make the texture, which then they bring up here, which then, graphically points down at the image. So in so many ways, it's working. The texture is working toward the entire poster design, no matter what. This is my big takeaway right here on this one. Let's move out. Let's move the whole thing over. All right. If you want a specific texture, if you want asphalt or a road or sand or grass or whatever, then use it. We have a tendency as beginning designers to think the computer should do it, and we jump to we type in, how do I make a grass texture in Illustrator? And then you get some shitty, you get some bad grass. It looks like half cartoony, half thrown together. Instead of just going out and finding a picture of grass or finding a picture of asphalt, or here, actually cutting out the graphic, placing it on the asphalt and taking a picture of it. Like that's the whole fun part about this one, is like they did the opposite of what you would think you should do. And it works so well. You have the paper texture. It's a photo, but it's a graphic, and you can't get any better than that. And then the other part, I make fun of drop shadows all the time. This is the only time you ever have a drop shadow because it's real. So when you're doing that and you're thinking about, you're in my Photoshop class or working on something, or you're, any project, and you're like, I want a gritty texture, or like, this is the big one. And this is what I was trying to find the example, and I could not find out in Photoshop how to create the paper texture that I get at least 2 or 3 times a semester from a student. And I'm like, I don't know how you figured out how to make that, because I can't. But we don't want that texture. There's a repeat, and I'll show you that. Maybe I'll kind of jump to that now. Well, but if you're like, I want asphalt, I want it to look like concrete, then you just go concrete, hit return, you go to images, and you just start finding these flat, real, somebody took a nice picture of some concrete, and you use it. You don't try to fake it. So that's like my big takeaway. People want to do it all the time. If you want paper, I want my poster to look like it's super old on super old paper. Old paper. Like not these stupid stock ones where it's like poorly done, but like there's some really good, people took pictures of old paper, and then you overlay this and you're done. You don't try to like fake it. Like there's some really poor textures. Like these are too much for me. But you can just do that, paper texture. It's a big one. So next time you're doing it, like just go online and be like, oh, I need to find that perfect paper texture. Like that's it. Take a picture yourself. You just do that. Before there was a lot of stock photography. A couple decades ago, finding stuff online wasn't as easy. Oh, we shot it all the time. Oh, I want like a nice paper texture. I'd go to the paper store. Yeah, we had paper stores. Go buy the piece of paper I wanted, light it, shoot it, and then put that in my backdrop. Now they're just available all over online. This piece, all texture. Even the flat becomes a texture, which is really great. So we have a pattern to texture in the background. This halftone dot, that's what it's called, halftone. And it's what newspapers use. It's like printing is done in halftones. It's a way you mesh the four colors, C, M, Y, and K together to make a full color image. But it's also the way a black and white image is transferred to for printing. A printing in black and white in a standard style, like a newspaper, and they may change. They couldn't print what would be called half the color. They could print black or white, but they couldn't print like gray. Gray would be a different color. So in order to get an image, a black and white image, they would halftone, which means they would break up that image into a series of dots that were bigger to smaller that created the illusion of a black and white image. And so that's what halftoning is. If you zoom in on an old comic book, you'll see halftoning, and zoom in on anything, you'll kind of see it now. Printing has changed with inkjet, where it is continuous tone, they call it. They don't have to break it up into these dots, but more the not professional printing is still done in this style. But that's the halftone. And then now us designers love to like exploit that halftone and make it really, show up like that. So it's like dots. This would be even clearer. You'd be able to see like the exact dots. And it's a great look. I like it. I use it. But then we even have texture scratched into the solid type. It's not just flat. And then they even did that with the ornaments, the solid ornaments. Everything's got texture on this piece. It just creates more interest. And it works, throughout the entire piece as well. There you go. Very flat. Only graphic. Except for this weird fur. I call it paper fur. But they got the illusion of this texture across, and it's really just a piece of zigzaggy with a drop shadow just on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other. But we get the feeling that there's a texture there. There's not a texture. It's all flat. There's nothing there. It's not real. But they did a good job of making this. I don't know if it's necessarily soft feeling or soft, ironic. But there is something to be said about which I will talk about now. Where should I finish? I'll come back to that piece. I'll come back because it's what I want to talk about. It's a pet peeve of mine with design and textures, though. And then we have this one. Nice, dirty. We got like some cool, like overlapping of the images is creating a texture there. They got the paint splatters that like morph into like some beautiful filigree work and all this kind of fun stuff. And it just ends up being fun and pretty, it's playful. It makes me feel like play when I look at that. So, it comes across, and it's all done with the texture. If this was a flat piece, it'd look 1,000 times different. At some point I should, design like a piece and be like, here's it with texture, here's it without. And you can kind of see like how that, evoking of the feeling. Like I mountain bike a little bit, and like that's the fun feeling. You got a little bit dirty, a little bit fun, bumping all over the place, all done with texture. The play is done and scribbled. It's hand drawn. It's got the scribble marks in it, cross hatching. So that's pretty rad. And all evokes. Now, something to watch out for when it comes to texture and using overlaying textures in design is repeat. I am not a fan of the repeat. I am not a fan of, in Photoshop when people do something and I see the same thing twice in one photo and they're trying to like trick me. And I'm like, no, that's the same one. You just moved it over, whatever. But you can see the repeat happening here and here and here, like all the small parts. And to me, this says like, I got lazy and just grouped this part and then copy, pasted it, moved it over. It doesn't seem intentional to me. And this is the dead giveaway on if you're developing a pattern and you start to tire of it and you start to do the repeat without altering your repeat, watch that. It's kind of like, I feel like it's very amateurish when that happens. And when you use other products for texture to create your backgrounds, watch it. Like, don't have it happen. And you get to recognize it over time. So I think I closed out. Oh yeah. And I point this out. I'm just going to create a document. Cancel. So here, you know, I'm just in Photoshop and I go to, I think it's under swatches. Oh shit, I'm gonna have to find it again. Textures. Let me find it. Adjustments. Oh, it's under, is it under brushes? No. Libraries. Nope. I don't do it and now I can't find it. It's so funny, I just had it open. Let me type it in. Grass. Return. Get help on grass, yeah. Nope. Oh, this is so sad. I can't find it now. All right, I'll have to hold off on it, Candle. There are ways that Photoshop and Illustrator allow you to add texture. And they're like, oh, you can, it's a little bit like rendering, but it's not rendering. Oh, I'm so mad I can't find it now. Don't use them. So the reason being is it ends up repeating. And you can see the repeat, and I can see the repeat. Oh, patterns right there. Here it is. Duh, it's just called patterns. So I can drop this, and Photoshop has them, and you can create a pattern. You can create, you know, I show you how to do it in Photoshop. But in Photoshop, you're creating a visual pattern. That's a pattern, right? I want it to repeat. But then they have these other ones, and they have these ways of doing it that don't look very well. Where did it just go? And I'll show you why. Here, I'll do obvious to less obvious. To me, it turns into a game of find the repeat. Why can't I do it? So find the repeat. It's here. If you look right there, it's right there. It's right there. You know, like you can see the pattern here to here to here. And so I can see that pattern. And with not much looking, anybody can see these patterns arise based off of a texture. Oh, I just wanted a texture. Well, you got to watch it. Can I see the pattern? And even in some of these, I can see this weird flow here. It's the same here. It's the same here. And can you see the gridding up there? It's kind of easier the further away you get. And so we don't notice it when we're on top of it. We're looking at our screen and we're like, oh, bring in that fur texture from Photoshop. But if you stand back and you make it small, you can really, really start to see the texture or the pattern come through in the texture. And that's why I would be like, go find an image of what you want and create it, and make sure that when you're using your texture, we're also not creating a pattern unless it is intentional. I know it's kind of like a roundabout way, but I see it happen all the time. Like I said, it's like a little bit like one of those things where I'm like, wait, don't you see the texture pattern? Like, we shouldn't see that. It doesn't happen in nature. It's not natural. So that's how you get about not running into that. So that is texture. Let us quickly look at the assignment. Opening. That's not this class. That's not this class. Texture project. All right. You're doing pairs, and they're listed here. Smooth versus rough, soft versus hard, organic versus geometric. That one's a little easy. Liquid versus solid, textured versus flat, which seems weird. Warm versus cool, old versus new. So you are to do opposites. I have my example in there that you'll turn off. And so I did like a matte texture. It's just like a scribbly matte texture, and then glossy. Honestly, for the glossy, you know what I had to do? Because I was like, how am I going to do this? I looked up a cartoon mirror and copied what a cartoon mirror is. You know, it doesn't take much. There's examples out there on how to do it and how to do it in Illustrator. No images, no photographs. I want you to do your best at trying to figure out how to get something to look like it's got texture in Illustrator. You only have to do the two. You pick your smooth, you know, all these to do and go for it. I do remember that one when I built this project. I was like, oh, it's taking me some time. So that's why I only did two of them. It's worth knowing how to do. I mean, they did it with this rabbit. You make fur, you know, soft, hard, you know, like pick what you want, fill it in. You guys everybody's doing great with these. So I don't see a big issue, but of course, just throw it out to me. We have the midweek review for a reason. Jump on in on that. Show me your work and we can get through it. Final one is your design practice. So I can just double click on it because I'm on a Mac. We are at Illustrator file. Again, fewer and fewer parts are being included. So then you have to go find the links. And then more and more things are kind of a little bit different than maybe they should be. You have to, like, you know, put your parts in. Oh, this text. Oh, you gotta put that text in separate from this text, and make sure you get in your color bars. People are forgetting the color bars, especially on CP. There's a big black box. You got to include that. And then what I'm also showing you when you do your designs, there's the artboard and there's bleed. And everything I do extends past the artboard. It bleeds off. So make sure you kind of you're aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it all fits in. We'll get more into that when I talk layouts, but that's why we're doing this. Make sure you're checking your layers. They're all beautifully layered there. Like examples, you find your examples. It's in the folder under links. Easy peasy. Any questions, comments, or concerns about texture? All right, awesome. You know what to do. I'm around. Just ask me any questions you got. Talk to you later. Bye.